election hasn't even started, and both sides are already claiming election interference. For example, Donald Trump has called special counsel Jack Smith's investigations into him, quote, another obvious attempt by the Harris-Biden regime to interfere in the 2024 presidential election. Trump also accused Democrats of allowing Americans living overseas to vote by mail in order to, quote, cheat.
On the other side of the aisle, Democrats point to a Microsoft report that shows Russian government-linked efforts targeting Harris. That effort involves spreading fake videos discrediting Harris. Plus, mainstream media loves to call Trump's run at the presidency a giant disinformation campaign. Joining us now to discuss is U.S. Election Assistance Commission Chairman Benjamin Hovland. Ben, thanks for joining us. So as Americans are looking to November and both parties are raising concerns about election interference, what from your perspective is the real threat that should concern Americans, if any?
Well, I think that it's a great reminder that when you're thinking about how you're going to participate, we're 18 days from the election, how you're going to make your voice heard, to get your information from your state or local election official about how to participate. Get that trusted source information, make your plan to vote. Are you going to vote by mail? Are you going to vote early in person or on election day? And if you're voting by mail, time's running out. Make sure you get that in plenty of time to allow for its delivery. So again, we've seen almost 1 million people vote early in Georgia. We are in this election. And so again, making that plan to vote, getting your information from your local election official on how to participate are critical.
Ben, in the media, we hear about election interference coming from foreign governments and disinformation campaigns. But I was talking to my mother yesterday, who's in Arizona, who voted in Arizona early, and she told me that she was afraid to go to the polls on Election Day because she'd already heard in news reports that in preparation for Election Day and protecting, these voting locations, they even had snipers that were setting up on top of buildings. I mean, which shocks me, but I guess they're doing everything they can to prevent something worse than 2020. What other types of operations are they doing for Election Day to protect voters? And is that labeled as interference, or is that just potentially some sort of situation that might come up?
Well, there's a couple things to unpack there. One, we have heard from our partners in the intelligence community, from folks like the Director of National Intelligence. We are seeing foreign adversaries, particularly on social media, try to influence Americans, try to further sow divisions in our country. And so it is important, again, to think about what you're seeing. Think if this feels like it's intentionally there to make you mad. We have seen real world consequences from this, with threats and harassment of election officials. Certainly there's real world consequences to that and concerns. But then one of the things that we have seen since 2020 is more coordination than I've seen at any point in my career with local law enforcement. We've got more work happening at the federal government to support the state and local officials who run elections. And what that looks like depends on your community. But at the end of the day, your elections are run in your community by a local election official who lives in your community, and Election Day is run by poll workers who are your friends, who are your neighbors, who are people that live next door and help stand up and serve our democracy and serve our nation and serve the voters in their district.
We just learned that about 100 members of the Labor Party are planning to come to the United States to campaign on behalf of Kamala Harris. How should people view that move? Is that a form of election interference, particularly from foreign sources, or is this something that is considered more benign when compared to Russian meddling, for example?
I think there are specific rules about what people can and can't do. And when I look at, any piece of this area, whether it's campaigning, whether it's observing, whatever it is, the key piece is that our elections are run by sets of rules. And while each state has different rules for running elections or observing elections, those are set out in the law. Those are set by state legislatures. And the critical piece is that people follow the law. And as long as we've got that, then what we know is that our elections are run professionally, and that they're transparent, and that our election officials follow the law.
Ben, in terms of the foreign interference that's happening and the disinformation campaigns that you mentioned that are spreading online, can you explain sort of the strategies? Because I'm sure a lot of our viewers want to know whether or not what they're reading could potentially be disinformation and who it's coming from. We've heard Russia, we've heard Iran. What else is out there?
Certainly we've seen and heard all of those and others. I think that the constant theme is that you have autocracies, or you have other governments that don't believe in democracy. And so, you may see in one moment or another that they're supporting one candidate or the other, but at the end of the day, what they don't support is American democracy. They want to make it look chaotic. They want to sow divisions amongst Americans, and that may be to, try to weaken America, or it may have a domestic impact for them. Again, if they're starting to hear pushes in their own countries for democracy, they can point and say, "Oh, why would you want anything to do with that? Look how chaotic that is," or America's supposed to be held up as this shining example, and look at what they're experiencing. But again, at the end of the day, the thing that makes the American democracy so great is that Americans do get to participate. They get to go out there and make their voices heard. And then at the end of the day, election officials conduct that election, run that election, count those votes, make sure that everything is done, the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed before they finally make that certification. And then it's critical that we respect the voice of the American people.
I think this is an important point, Ben, about how countries want to show division within America. It's not purely a partisan endeavor, but simply to try to sow chaos. To that end, at what level do we think it is actually a bad idea to give too much credence to the idea of foreign election interference for fear of showing these countries that their efforts are potentially working?
I think there's a big piece in helping Americans to understand that this is part of what is happening. For a lot of people, social media has been around now for a few years, but for many Americans, we've seen efforts by foreign adversaries, for decades, but those often took different forms. And now that you have that up close and personal feel of being on your phone, it's important for people to have the ability to think critically, to pause for a moment and think about, does this feel outrageous? Does this feel like this is trying to make me angry? And then wonder, where that is coming from. And again, it may be true, but it also very well may be actors in a foreign adversary country trying to sow those divisions, recognizing that we do have very valid differences in America. We do have political debate. We do have people with different positions, but so often what we see is people sort of stoking those divisions, trying to crank people up and get them angry at other Americans. And so it's important to be aware of that and to be conscious of that, and to think, does this feel true, or does this seem like something that somebody's just trying to make me angry?
That's a great point, Ben. There's disinformation, like straight up misinformation, disinformation, and then there's amplifying certain messages to create more division, which of course we're seeing play out almost every single day. Thank you so much for joining us. This is such a critical conversation. I know you've got a lot to do right now, so go protect those poll workers for us, please.
Thanks for having me. And for your viewers, don't forget to vote. Make that plan to vote. That is the best thing you can do for those poll workers, is show up and be sure to thank them while you're there.
Absolutely.